We're going to be talking about pricing errors and your rights as a consumer if the price at the till doesn't match what was on the shelf. And then hopefully some time for open line calls as well in the second half hour. Wendy, always great to have you with us. Welcome back.
Thanks, Pippa. Always good to be here.
Wendy, today's show is going to be, I think, really a reminder to all of us not to play Candy Crush on your phone while the teller is ringing up things at the till, because I'm guilty of that myself. But if you are, particularly if you're someone who likes to take advantage of a special, like a buy two, get the third free, or a reduced price if you buy multiple items, it's easy to pop those items into the trolley and think that's a great deal, but not always easy to claim that discount.
Yes. So, and I think let's be fair here. Let's start out by saying that there's a massive volume of supermarket transactions every minute of every day, and grocery prices are particularly volatile. So, making sure that the prices at the till sync with the prices that on the tags at the shelf 100% of the time is a huge ask. Errors happen. And so I think it's a really appropriate move on behalf of two supermarket groups, first Pick and Pay and then Woolworths, to introduce a wrong price compensation policy for its customers. It is voluntary. It's not legal. We'll get to the complexities of the policies in a minute. But
when you say not legal, not mandatory, I think
it's
is
not
what you mean. Yes,
mandatory.
okay,
Sorry, that's the wrong word. Not legally enforceable.
Yes, okay.
Right. Okay, so your legal right in such a situation, and I ran this past the Ombudsman for Consumer Goods and Services many moons ago, is that once you get to the till with a product and it scans the wrong price, you are entitled to insist on the product at the lower price. Of course, it must be the barcode on the shelf tag and the barcode on the actual product must match, because there are instances where the tag are misaligned, so you get a tag that's sitting above a product, and you think that's the price, but it's actually for the product above or next to or whatever.
Or somebody put the wrong,
or somebody moved.
Put it back in the wrong place, and the thing you grabbed off the shelf wasn't actually the thing that price tag indicated.
So the barcodes must match. But I think, in the old days, we had physical price tags on every item, so it was easier to pick up when there was a mistake, because you were looking at it on the screen or whatever it was in the old days. I don't even remember pre-digital, and then on the product itself, whereas now you've got to remember what it was at the shelf, or have gone in for that special on the coffee or whatever the case may be, and know, but then you still got to be awake enough to see when it rings up at the till.
Can I just add an aside there? And what makes it even more complicated is that sometimes the specials only reflect at the end of the full shop. I think Woolies is one that does it that way. And so you see it go through at the higher price.
And you think hang on,
you've forgotten the special, but actually it's going to kick in right at the end of the transaction.
Yes. So your rights then would be call the manager or whatever, and a lot of people, I think, especially if it's a small amount, they might think, and especially at a busy time, peak time, might think, oh, this is really going to irritate everybody behind me. I don't know if I have the energy to do this, but that's fine. If that's your decision knowingly, that's good. But in an awful lot of cases, there are overcharge and overpayments made that are unnecessary. So your basic right is, look, this isn't correct, but then you'd have to schlep off to the shelf, I suppose, to show them or whatever. But that, it's good to know what your rights are, and then we get to the compensation policies.
And I'm smiling because it happened to me in December in Clicks, in the middle of super high season Christmas shopping. The hairdryer I had picked up for my daughter, scanned at a price way above what it had been labelled on the shelf, and I sort of said to the teller, that's incorrect, it was on the shelf at this. And it was, you could see they did handle it. I was given it at the lower price. From a legal perspective, it was well handled, but you could see the irritation. It's the busiest time of year, and the irritation of the people in the line behind me. But in this case, it was a couple of $100 difference. So it really was worth saying, I'm going to dig in my heels here and insist that you honour the price that was advertised on the shelf. But you do. It's easy to say, oh, it's too much of a schlep. Everyone behind me is getting irritated. It's for a small amount anyway. I'm just going to let it go.
But I think we all should I think we all should have compassion for each other. It's like the crying baby on the plane. Mine are long grown up, but I was that mom once.
Yeah.
And we should all have empathy. If you're irritable with the person in front of you, it could be you. It should be you when it's wrong. We should expect, it should be a normal practice to say, call it out and say very nicely, you don't make a scene, don't be aggressive. Mistakes happen. Please correct this.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that we feel awkward about it. It should be something we expect of each other to do.
Yeah, that's a good point.
For all of us.
No, let's just take a look at the case study which prompted this conversation today. Andrew Mateos posted a picture on X a little while ago. It was a photo of his till slip from a shop he had done at Checkers at Virginia Circle in Durban North. And alongside it, he posted the picture of the advertised special. It was on an 800-gram pack of Clover cheese. And sure enough, the price that was reflecting on his till slip was the normal price of 149 Rand, but reflected on the special label was you only pay 110 Rand if you use your extra savings card. And he had done that, and that's reflected on his till slip that he had used the extra savings card. And his comment was, he tweeted, always check your slip. So we don't really know whether he did sort of speak up and claim the right to the lower price. I'm pretty sure he would have. But Wendy, the point of him putting it on social media was to raise awareness of this need for more vigilance to check that the special that's advertised has gone through. You've told us what his legal rights were. He was entitled to insist on that lower price. He
was indeed. And as you say, the fact that he tweeted it tells me that he got it when he pointed it out. It was a difference of 40 Rand, which is not inconsiderable on a pack of cheese, let's just say.
Yep.
And this happened in a Checkers store, which the Shoprite Group doesn't have a compensation policy. So the most he would have been entitled, there would be his legal right to it at the advertised price, right? So as always happens when someone posts about this, there was just a flood of Me Too comments on Twitter and probably on other social media platforms as well if he posted them there. And a Pick n Pay customer responded to his post to say, Pick n Pay used to do this. And I think these words are very interesting. Used to do this. If it scans wrong, you get it for free. And then they changed it to double the difference. Now I think they just pay the difference. When my daughter was a baby, Pick n Pay was selling expensive baby bottles and the price was marked wrong. So I got the bottle for free, says this Pick n Pay customer.
That's a nice one.
I went back to the same Pick n Pay the next day. It was still marked wrong. So I got another one free.
Oh, no.
The next day, they'd fixed the price. So I think it's interesting there because their own incompetence around the pricing was now starting to cost them too much. And so they corrected it. And so be it. So you can argue that she was knowingly cashing in on it.
Yeah, the first time around, you think lucky you. Second time around, I'm like, that's not so
I'm a little bit
kosher.
uncomfortable with that. And I have had stories, I've heard stories, people, they probably won't now, but I've had, when I've talked about this on other radio shows in the past, people phoning in, bragging about how they, the first time it was a mistake, they didn't knowingly choose that item in order to benefit and get it free, but they went to another store and got the item
deliberately
free as
gamed
well.
the system.
And I don't think that's they're saying, well, it's if they don't want to get their pricing right, I'm going to take advantage. I'm not entirely comfortable with that.
Yeah,
it's not the purpose of the policy.
It's not. And as you said, to knowingly go in and game the system, you can. I get it. You can argue if they're not savvy enough to correct it, it's going to cost them, and the more it costs them, the more likely they are to improve their services and their vigilance on this. But yeah, that one leaves a bit of a bad taste. But to your point, things can go wrong. Alan in Belleville saying, a quick question regarding pricing: is there any ceiling point to this argument? I know I'm being cynical, but what if you had a disgruntled employee who purposefully swapped shelf talkers around so that the shop would have to honour the shelf price? The barcode has to match is my first response to that, Alan.
Yes.
So even if they switched everything around, it would be nuisance value, but on closer inspection, it wouldn't match up.
They're wise to this, and we'll get to some of the not so great behaviour on the part of shoppers in a bit, and why we don't see signs in these Pick n Pay and Woolworths, and we'll get to what their policies are on it, but why they don't advertise it with signage as they used to do years ago. And it's because they don't want to encourage people to game it.
To game the system, okay. But before we get to that, let's just talk a little bit about what policies are in place at the different major retailers. And Wendy, you mentioned that Pick n Pay was the first to sort of act on this proactively with a compensation
I don't know what year
policy.
it was. I mean, I was already doing consumer journalism at the time, but I can't find a reference to it in I was scrapbooking back in those days. They're long gone. But it was somewhere in the 2000s.
Okay.
Right. And the compensation is if a price scans at a higher amount at the till than was displayed on the shelf tag, you will get that item free and any identical ones, in other words, barcoding, matching, etc., at the lower price. Now, there are some T's and C's, and we'll go into them in a bit because I haven't taken a deep dive into this for a while. So I actually had some learning to do as well. And then a few years later, Pick n Pay started with their 3 for the price of 2 and a lot of those kinds of specials, and loads of people were emailing me to say it didn't ring up at the till, I didn't get it, and it was awkward, and they called the manager and whatever. So I happened to be meeting with the Pick n Pay director at the time about something else. He was in town and we had a face-to-face, and I started talking about this, and he said, oh, it's very I said, why don't you do what Pick n Pay is doing? You have a compensation policy. It'll incentivize the stores to make sure it's right. Why don't you give them the first? I mean, this is your opposition. Why don't you?
Sorry, is this Woolies you were talking to now?
Yes.
Okay.
And they were like, this guy was like, no, but it's very, very rare that we make these mistakes. I said, well, then you haven't got a lot to lose, have you? Anyway, I'm not saying it was entirely because of me, but in I think it was 2011, middle of 2011. Woolies introduced the same. It was if the price scan's wrong, and it's not just food, it's across all their departments, you get the first one free and any identical ones for the lower price. And I checked in the last week, that is still the case. You won't see signage, but that is the case. Unfortunately, because there is no signage, and I think a lot of people don't know about it, sometimes a store manager will say that's not our policy or it isn't anymore. It actually is. I have checked.
So just confirm that again. So the current policy is if there is a pricing error, when you get to the till, if you point it out, you get the first item free and the rest at the lower price.
Yes. The barcodes must match.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's Woolworths. And what is Pick n Pay's current policy?
Woolworths having been a bit bullied into following suit.
Yeah.
Pick n Pay, don't ask me the exact date, but quite a few years ago, introduced a slight dilution of that. It's now double the difference. So in Andrew's case, if I can find the example, I did do some notes.
I think down at the bottom of page.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Yeah.
So in Andrew's case, the difference was 40 Rand between what that pack of Gouda was advertised at and what he was charged. He was charged the original price, not the sale price. So double that, you get 80 Rand. Subtract 80 from the correct price of the product, which was 110 Rand. He could have got that cheese for 30 Rand.
Okay. So sorry, I just need to clarify here. So this is Pick n Pay shifting to a new policy of double the difference.
Yes. I'm saying that. So if Andrew had this experience in a Pick n Pay rather than a Checkers, he could have not just got it at the lower price, the sale price. He would have said, I want double the difference, please, because of your pricing error.
Okay. So that was a change, though. So Pick n Pay started with the same policy that Woolies still has, of the first one free, the rest at the lower price. Then they moved to the alternative policy of double the difference. So if an item scans at a higher price at the till than it was on shelf, they will give you the item at the marked price, plus, what is it? Plus double the difference.
Double the difference.
Okay,
yes.
Minus double the difference.
And in some cases, if it's quite a high ticket item, you will get it for free.
Okay. Well, here's an interesting one. So to the point of somebody taking advantage to some extent, or is it taking advantage? The person writes in, during Christmas, I went to a Woolies. They had a whole table of imported goods marked at 0. I took one item that I wanted to try and a photo of the price notice. I showed the cashier at the till and the manager gave it to me for free. And the defense is I could have been a jerk and taken the whole table of products for free. I'm surprised he was given it or she was given it. Because, Wendy, isn't there an exclusion here for an obvious error?
An obvious mistake, yes. We're not talking about a special not being programmed into the till correctly, or the special ended and they didn't change the price tag. We're talking here about an obvious error, and in which case the Consumer Protection Act does protect retailers from shoppers what the legal people call snatching at a bargain. So
Yes.
knowing it's wrong. No stores don't sell free things. You might get a free something if you buy something, but you're not going to just get. There's such thing as a zero price tag, except in the case of fruit. Let the kiddies help themselves to these apples and bananas, but we're not a price tag of naught. No. So he got lucky there because the store wasn't, and that's not an issue of a lack of synchronization between a price tag and the till point.
That's an obvious mistake. Okay. So, Wendy, the other thing just that's interesting in Pick and Pay's policy is, so they have this policy of the double the difference. If there is a mistake, they will compensate you to the tune of double the difference of the discrepancy between the prices. But there are some exclusions there, and one of those exclusions. A couple of the exclusions are tobacco products and baby formula, which I know is a problematic product that gets stolen often, and there's so many issues around it. But that aside, Pick and Pay reserves the right at any time to exempt certain additional products from double the difference in order to comply with laws and regulations. But they also have a sort of a caveat that it's not applicable to special offers in all cases.
Yes.
And that I found strange.
Yes, I that was a red flag for me as well. As I say, it's been a while since I've actually gone onto Pick and Pay's website to read this policy in full. So it says promotional items, activity, bulk buys are excluded from double the difference. So I asked Pick and Pay, I said, in most cases, in my experience, when these cases come to me, the mistakes have happened precisely in the case of promotional items. So is this, almost nullifying the compensation policy? And the answer was, we'll always do right by our customers. If a promotional item scans at the incorrect price, we will always honor the lower shelf or promotional price, ensuring that the customer still receives the benefit of the deal. In most cases, the savings from the promotion are greater than what double the difference would have been based on the standard selling price.
Wendy, before the break, you told us so Woolies have the lowest price first item free and the rest at the lower price that was advertised.
Right, yes.
Pick and Pay have got the double the difference offer.
Yes.
It was actually a Checkers case study that sent us down this rabbit hole. What is their policy? And then we'll go to some listener questions.
So they don't have one. They have what the legal minimum is, which is that we have a pricing policy in place. This is quoting directly from their response to me. A customer may not be charged more than the displayed price. In instances where there's a discrepancy between the price displayed on the shelf or the PI label and the price displayed at the till point, the product will be sold at the lowest of the two prices. Customers are encouraged to immediately engage store management when they notice any pricing anomalies so that urgent action can be taken to resolve the issue. So they're agreeing with us. Make a stand, bring it to our attention.
And we'll fix it. Okay.
Right. While we strive for accuracy, errors unfortunately occur from time to time due to human error, such as outdated shelf labels. With thousands of deals being processed weekly across our nationwide store network, we continuously work. You can imagine what they're saying. I said to them, would you consider doing what your competitors do, Woolworths and Pick and Pay? Would you consider introducing a compensation policy of some kind? And that question was just ignored, which is what corporates do sometimes rather than say no. They just pretend you didn't ask them in the first place.
So let's go to a couple of listener voice notes and comments and questions as well. Firstly, Janet in Philadelphia saying, if I am specifically buying a special, I always take a photograph of the shelf item and price.
Excellent.
And that's a very good way of warding it off, so you're armed with the proof if you need to. Somebody else suggesting, if you're embarrassed about holding up the queue, rather pay at the wrong price and then go directly to the store manager and ask them to sort it out. That's from Jean, who says if there's a long queue of people behind you, process the transaction and then take it up away from the till, which I guess is a courtesy to the other people shopping in the store with you.
Actually, the store should have their managers trained to do that, to say, oh, terribly sorry, could you just step aside and
let's sort it out for you.
Yes, rather than holding everyone up.
Okay. We heard from Francis, who said, I had a till slip error last week at Woolies in Hermanus. I'd bought 3 items of clothing, and when I got home, one of the more expensive items had been scanned twice and the cheapest not at all. That's a very unusual one.
Yes.
She said, such a lesson to always check till slips. I was refunded into my card account, but this takes 3 days to clear. So at least they refunded you, which
Yeah.
they obviously were obliged to do. But Francis, I take your point. It takes time. I hope it was all done over the phone, because I know the real schlep is if you've got to go back into the store. That's what makes a lot of people just say, I'll leave it, because
Yes.
I couldn't be bothered to
Yes.
go back. Now, speaking of only discovering it later, Lucy wrote in early on in the show today. Lucy, thanks for your patience. I bought a sweater at Pick n Pay last week, and when I got home, I saw that I had been overcharged by 10 Rand more than the price on the tag. I'd like to know from Wendy whether a full refund still applies. Well, not a full refund for the whole, or is
Well,
it? She
yes,
was, no, actually, you're
absolutely.
right. She was overcharged.
Yes, absolutely.
But it's not a full refund, it's a double the difference, right?
Was it Woolworths?
It's Pick n Pay in this
Pick
case.
and Pay
yes.
is double the difference. And interestingly, I queried a line in Pick n Pay's T's and C's around this compensation policy of double the difference. It says policy is applicable only from time of purchase. And I said, do you mean only at time of purchase? Could you please explain that? Because I thought that might mean that, as in Lucy's case, if you only discover the overcharge when you get home, are you then disqualified from you can get your 10 Rand back, but are you then disqualified from the compensation policy? And Pick n Pay says no. The policy applies to customers who have an intention to purchase a product. Double the difference would only apply if the customer was purchasing the product, not if they identified an issue while browsing the aisle, for example. Should a customer only notice a pricing error after leaving the store, they'd qualify for the policy as they have bought the product. So you can go back. I don't fully understand, now that I'm reading it out loud, how that would work. How would you know that there was a problem if you were only looking at the price on shelf? How would you know?
Because you wouldn't know what the till is going to
You're
ring
not
up.
going to
Yeah.
know. So I'm not
It's a bit
quite sure.
nonsensical.
But the main thing is that you don't lose out if you only notice when you get home.
Okay, so Lucy, you have the right to take it back to Pick n Pay, and
Please let us know
they
what
should give you
happens.
20 Rand back, because if it was overcharged by 10 Rand, double the difference is going to be 20 Rand.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so let us know if that doesn't happen, please. We've also got a voice note that's come through, and let's take a listen.
Hi, Pippa. I'm just listening to you and Wendy Knowler now about pricing. Stuart here. My wife regularly gets overpriced at Woolworths, almost on a weekly basis. And of course, she pays the amount and then takes it back and shows the manager. And typically, she gets the product for free and she gets the money returned. But irrespective, I heard what Wendy says, thousands of transactions going through every day. These people are making billions of rands, and their MDs and CEOs are getting paid massive bonuses. There's no excuse for making mistakes on the shelf and stealing our money. Anyway, it's Stuart. Just thought I'd let you know. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, Stuart.
That's not quite what I said, Stuart, but that's what you're saying. I'm saying that a lot of mistakes are being made. I don't think for a moment that it's deliberate. I think it's human error, and
It's a factor of scale.
it's a matter of scale. And I equally feel strongly that we need to notice. It is, slightly annoying that one does have to be that vigilant, but it's the way it is. We do have to be vigilant and notice and make sure that we get the refund or whatever compensation is applicable. And certainly I would like to push for the other groups to also consider a compensation policy. If they're serious about this issue, about their customers not losing out as a result, then it's their policy that it's actually quite rare that they work very hard at getting this right. If it's quite rare, then you've got
It shouldn't be
to
an
lose.
issue. Yeah, absolutely.
Whatever the compensation is.
So a lot comes down to the store's sort of sense of goodwill towards the customer, Wendy, and all your points taken. Everybody is human. From time to time, mistakes will happen, especially when you're operating at the kind of scale of goods and fluctuations in prices that this environment is. But so much, as you've said so often, comes down to how they respond
Of course.
when the mistake is pointed out. And here's an example. Marcel writing in to say, years ago in the mid-2000s, I purchased a Monopoly set at Pick n Pay in Tiger Valley, and the till price was higher than the sticker price. I pointed this out. To this day, I remember how the manager angrily credited that purchase. To be fair, I just wanted to pay the sticker price. And there's so much in that comment. Yes, you were entitled to pay the price it was advertised at. Firstly, the manager should not have been angry. You were within your rights to ask for that. And the fact that Marcel remembers it all of these years later, nearly 25 years later, tells you what a big impression that made. And I would guess, Marcel, that you probably didn't feel very good going back into that store again ever after.
It was made to feel like an irritation, and like she was grabbing at something grabbing at something she didn't deserve, and all that kind of thing. And that's just unacceptable. I don't think they would get away with that now, and certainly not with a compensation policy in place. But I must just repeat that it's one of those things that if you know, you know. If you notice, you can qualify. If you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah.
They certainly, I remember signs, and I've lost the photograph. I used to take photographs. There were signs at the tills that explained this policy. But you never, I don't know when I last saw one. And they don't advertise it, I feel, because there's a certain percentage of shopper who will try and exploit it and benefit in a way that was not intended. So this is why I like to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I'm talking to... about cases where it's a genuine, you responded to a special, or it was just a price cut, or it was just a normal price that scanned wrong. You know you're right, and if there's a compensation policy in the store you're in, claim it, ask for it, and don't take no for an answer.
Because they're not going to proactively offer it to you.
And sometimes they may deny its existence.
But do insist on your rights. Wendy, as always, thanks for all the hard work on behalf of our listeners, and we'll chat again next week, Wednesday.